So, challenge number three in the next Dark Star competition is going on. We are down to 11 contestants out of the, let's see, we started with 26. Well, we actually started with 130, and then we ended up with 26. Narrowed that down to, was it 21? Or 16. No, yeah. So we went from 26 to 16. So that was a bloodbath. And then, we, so then we had 16, and now we're down to 11. And so this is, it was hard, Stephanie, picking, it was hard getting down to 26 because there were a lot of really talented people who had initially applied. And the challenges just keep getting tougher, and the performances keep getting better. So let's talk a little bit about our two mentees today. We've got mentors for our challenge, starting with 2, 3, and 4, and this is challenge number 3. So let's talk to Jessie first, and I'd like to get an idea of how you're feeling about the competition.
I'm feeling excited. Certainly still nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole aspect of these things, of doing it live, is always, no matter how many times I practice and no matter how many times I even like try to go live on TikTok, as soon as I get in here, it's like I forget how to breathe. So
Oh yeah.
it's really great though, because it's learning that skill of kind of working
Mm-hmm.
under pressure. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've enjoyed all the feedback and watching all of my peers do their thing. Yeah, it's been really amazing so far.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. It is nerve-wracking though too, like doing it in front of people.
Hmm.
It's a whole different thing. Like I got used to, well, especially during COVID. You're working in your own little studio doing your own thing, and then next thing you know, if you get a job doing, going to a studio, all of a sudden there's people there listening to you doing your script, and it's kind of you have to like remember what it was like to socialize with people. So how about you, Zach? How are you feeling?
Similarly nervous. I mean, I'm super excited about the competition itself still.
Hmm.
Not to sound, not to do the humble thing, but I can't believe I'm still in it. So everything that happens after this point is just icing on the cake for me. The
Yeah.
last mentor
Nice.
session was awesome. The feedback was fantastic. So I'm excited for this one, but I'm more nervous for these mentor sessions than I am for anything else. I've done live readings before, more
Yeah.
nervous for this than submitting the thing, even if this wasn't getting posted anywhere. Just
Hmm.
nervous to be here and do this.
Yeah, it is a little bit different animal, but clearly you have done the Lord's work, and have gotten yourself to where we are right now.
Yeah.
So I think you really should give yourself a pat on the back, and I'm hoping that everything that we do moving forward, even the people who didn't make it to the next round, I'm hoping that they're able to, you know, learn from everything that we've got going over here, because, gosh, our mentors are, they're pretty amazing. And like, you pay hundreds of dollars for these kinds of coaching sessions that everybody gets to participate in, or at least see. And so I think that's it's a really cool thing. And I love the way that the competition is going. And, we've gotten a lot of people reaching back out, and I'm communicating with, with other narrators. So it's a lot of fun. So speaking of amazing coaches, I want to introduce you to your coach. Yeah, and let me tell you something. Because of the challenge number 3 is it's sexy time. Because if you want to, this is who wants to be the next Dark Star, and at this point in time, Dark Star is all about the romance. And to be a romance narrator, you got to know how to do the sexy time. So this this is a really great coach for you to talk to, because Stephanie Rose, well, she's got 320 audiobooks out now, right, Stephanie?
Something around there.
Yeah, and when you look at the books that Stephanie has done, we've done a good number of books together, you and I.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you said like 20, right?
20. Yeah.
So yeah, starting with I think I like Naked Love or Look the Part were one of the first ones, but then we've got a trio of S. Massery jams, the Bully Romance.
Mm-hmm.
And
The Fallen Royals, Wicked,
the Fallen
Wicked
Royals,
series, I think. Yeah.
And you remember the Ali Martinez M. Maybe rom-com, which was When the Walls Come Down.
Yep.
Which was pretty good. But there's some amazing romance audiobooks that you've narrated. And what is that? There's like a whole, it's a series, right? You've got the American Queen, American King, American Prince. That's that
So
new,
it's the new
Camelot series, right?
Mm-hmm. From Sierra Simone. Yep.
Those are fire. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's why
And
they're fire.
what was that other one? There was one called Forever My Girl.
Forever My Girl by Heidi McLaughlin. I think I may have done about 20 of this series since Forever My Girl. She just keeps writing the next generation and the next generation, which I love.
Oh,
but
this is so
Forever
cool.
My Girl was made into a movie in 2018 and was released in theaters. And it was so cool to get to see,
Oh man, that is so
a book.
cool.
I
The
read
only
the
thing
book
that would
first.
be the only thing that'd be cooler is if you could play it. You could be in
Right.
the movie.
Right. Exactly. That'll be the
best.
next goal.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. So yeah, so you guys, you really do have an amazing coach in Stephanie Rose, and I think that you guys are going to have a really good time while you're getting this constructive criticism, because it's a sorry, I'm losing my focus. I'm looking for my screen. Oh, there it is. Because I want to follow along with the script. So let me give you an idea what we're going to do. Jessie and Zack are familiar with the drill because they've been through this before. But what we'll have them do, Stephanie, is go through the challenge. Maybe they can read the script. It's a short script, maybe 3 paragraphs, and you're going to give them direction on ways that they can make these scenes more compelling, more relatable, and hotter.
Okay.
So, that sound good? All right.
It sounds great. I want to make sure I know how to mute myself, and I'm not sure I do know
Oh, yeah.
how
So
to.
you look down at the bottom and you see down there's a little mic thing.
I see the mic
And if you
thing.
just click on that mic thing, it'll mute you. Good deal. Okay. So let's start with Jessie. If you're up for it, Jessie, we can get you going on this script. Let me give you a real quick background. Holding On Today by Lily K.C. is a wonderfully written story, and this is written in third person omniscient, so it'll work for both of you guys. And you've had a chance to take a look at the script, so go ahead and give it a read through, and then we'll let Stephanie take it from there. That sound good?
Yeah. So you want the whole thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just making sure.
All right, thanks.
All right. And I won't be on screen, but
That's
otherwise I won't be close to my mic, so I have to pick.
Gotcha.
Okay. Grasping her jaw, he angled her head back as he pressed closer, lowering his head and silencing anything else she may have said. At the same time, his fingers found their way between her legs, sliding slowly in her slickness before diving in. His kiss swallowed her cry, but her body convulsed against his hand, the leg around his hip pressing inward, pulling him closer. His thumb massaged her, his fingers sank into her, his mouth devoured hers. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she was clinging to him for dear life, shuddering beneath his touch and crying out against his lips. She started to unravel, her head beginning to toss as she all but tried to climb him with one leg still hooked around him. He forced her head still as he watched her. Her leg beneath her threatened to buckle. Her fingers clawed at his flesh. She bucked against him, biting at his lips in her heightened state. And when she exploded, arching off the wall into him, she watched him devour her response, memorizing every eyelash flutter, tremble of muscle in her belly, panted breath, and the whisper of his name.
Nice job, Jessie.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job. So what do you think, Stephanie?
Oh my gosh, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. I wish I could listen to that a bunch of times in a row because I'm trying to make notes.
To be able to, yeah.
Jessie, you're so talented. You've got such a great voice. You've got such a great storytelling, part of your energy and your essence. And this is a great script for you. I hopefully will have some notes to help just make it even better.
Yeah.
Because what you're working with is already great. And most of my notes that I was jotting down, I think this gets a little tricky, especially when we're talking about a sex scene, because it feels like it can be all kind of like one note. It can be all the same thing. Like we've started, the act, and then we're going to go through to the end of the act, and maybe there's a big moment at the end, but overall it kind of feels like the same beat. And I think what you have here is you have a lot of opportunity to explore some different beats. And to give it some more dimension. And I think by giving it more dimension and exploring different beats, you're going to find that you're naturally more pulled into the story yourself because you're going through different parts of it. And that's going to transfer into what it is that we hear. And so my first note that I wrote down, the very beginning, and just overall, actually, I would say, I wonder, because I don't know you and I don't know your speaking voice, but I wonder if this is closer to your speaking voice that you're using, or if it's maybe a softer voice. And if it's a softer voice, something I always try to recommend that women stay away from is using a softer voice. Because for me personally, I'll say, I don't think it allows me access to my full instrument. If I'm using a softer voice the whole time and this is how I'm going to sound, I'm not going to be able to go up and down and around and do all the things that I feel like I might need to do as the character in that scene. So I would just invite you to maybe, see if that feels right to you. If not, like maybe there's some room there to land more in your regular register if that's not happening.
Yeah.
I wrote down that the opening felt a little bit like, I wrote down soft, but just like maybe like sweet. It felt very sweet and the way that you were sort of telling the story, but it doesn't read that way. Grasping her jaw, angled her head back, pressed closer. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of more of an active scene, which can also be totally sexy in not a sweet way.
Right.
I also wrote down, let's see. So his thumb massaged her, his fingers sank into her, his mouth devoured hers. That feels like a little bit of a list to me. And if it is going to be a list, like the author has written these three things side by side, maybe the author wants you to put some more definition into those three things. And it can be, like a procession of like the thumb first and then the fingers and then the mouth, right? Like these are getting more intimate with that list. I wrote down that she started to unravel is going to be the start of a new beat. And it says it there, right? She started to unravel. So this is going to, if I was reading this script, what I would think to myself is like, I'm going to have to start feeling different in this moment than I have been up until now, because starting to unravel is a really clear character arc, character shift. And even though it is third person omniscient, with romance and with stuff like this, I don't know. I don't think we can get away with just reading it off the page. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think, we're actors. We're here to tell the story. That's another one of my... This
is going to be from somebody's POV, right?
Right. Yeah. It's from somebody's POV. And then, and Troy, that totally segues into my next point, which is, one of the best things that I've heard from a coach is that the reason, you're telling this story to somebody. You're confessing this story to somebody.
Oh, and that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Right. And when we do that, it's less about here's what happened to me. And it's more about what do you think about what happened to me, which creates a relationship in the scene and
Wow.
and gives you more reason to say what you're saying. Why would you say some of these really intimate things unless you were confessing to a very best friend and you want to know what they think? Like, can you believe this happened to me? Oh my God. And then this happened. And oh my, and it gets you right out of that trap of talking sexy talk with sexy
Man,
voice.
the cool thing about this whole the next Dark Star thing is like, I want you guys to think that it's all about you, but I'm sitting here getting free coaching sessions here, like, yeah, confessing your story. Fuck yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you're
that's
confessing
beautiful.
because you're excited or because you're nervous or because you're afraid or because you're, you don't know what to think, but there's a reason why you're telling somebody the things that you're telling them. Which for me always helps me, like I said, snap out of that, rote romance voice.
Yeah. So how would you do when you get to the part where it says, she started to unravel? What's your change that you say where this takes it into another gear?
I mean, I think it's an internal shift. I think as actors, everybody kind of probably has their own process. And my quality check is always like, does this feel real to me? Do I feel like I am able to picture the things that I'm saying? Can I see the room? Can I see the person? Can I feel the heat? If that's all true for me, then I feel like I've checked the box, I can move on. And I think everybody should have that internal barometer of, does this feel real to me? And, it might be different to me than another actor, how they decide to make that shift. But to me, it feels like an opportunity to start to, move into that next phase of we're starting and now we're unraveling. And then I also wrote when she exploded. So that's another beat. And we don't need to be commercial voiceover actors, and we don't need to be like exploded, 7-Up, crunch. Like we don't
That's
need
what
to
I
do.
say. Every time at that moment, I'm like, oh, 7-Up, yes.
Yes.
Sprite.
Free advertising for 7-Up. You're welcome. Never will drink a 7-Up the same way. But that's another chance to shift into that other heightened state. And it doesn't mean that you have to rush through it and it has to be so dramatic, but it does mean that you get a chance to shift internally. And what does that mean to you? What would that feel like if you were telling someone I exploded, even though this is not in first person? And then my final thing I'm going to say, because I feel like I've been talking for a long time.
This is great.
No, it's
going.
This just reminded me is a really cool trick if you're having any trouble clicking into it, or even if you just have, if I had a script like this, I probably would do this trick with the first couple pages just to get my mind in the right place, is to replace all the third person, pronouns with I, and just see how that feels. Not that you're going to read it that way, but and when I exploded, arching the wall, off the wall into him, I watched him devour her response. Like, even if that doesn't make sense, just there's something about putting that I in there that shifts it internally, right? This is all an internal shift because voice acting is, it's so intimate. We can hear how you feel. And so it's really about helping your acting body to feel what the character's feeling or what the storyteller's feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. And I think that, like when you bring up those points where the story shifts in that, at those crucial moments, that's where maybe you can, that advice you have for, not keeping it all in your soft voice, having that arsenal, that toolbox of using your full range can, comes in where maybe after the exploded, it goes back to soft, or, I think that's great. Like using your range to your advantage to make the story more, involved and intimate.
Yeah. And I think more relatable too, because, one of the things that I think is tricky with romance is that people maybe feel like they can't relate to it. It's not real. It's too fantasy. It's make believe, whatever. And I think the more human that we can be as storytellers, the more people can connect to what's underneath a lot of these romance stories, which is just, what everyone can relate to, which is love and butterflies and nerves and first kisses. And like, this is stuff that, this makes the world go around. So we gotta
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think that's, I don't know if you've probably had a similar conversation with an author who says, wow, when I heard my words, spoken back to me,
Mm-hmm.
it hit different.
Yeah.
I think that is, maybe like, one of the best compliments you can give to an author is to deliver their words back to them in the way that they meant it when they were kind of like reaching into their soul to come out, to come up with those, with those thoughts. And if you can match that, then, that's a good thing. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I like that. All right, Zach. No pressure. No pressure on
Okay.
you. I want to. So we've got Se Zell coming in. Laney, how are you?
So sorry. My internet's been in and out all day. We had a thunderstorm, but I find
Oh,
so
that's the yeah. That's the only danger of doing these virtual meetings. But I'm glad you're here. I think that you're going to have a great time. Stephanie Rose is your mentor, and we talked a lot about, Stephanie and I have done 20 books together. Stephanie is great authority on romance audio. So I think you're going to enjoy it, especially if you go back to the beginning and replay her notes on Jessie stuff. So now it's Zach's turn. Zach, are you ready to give us the man's point of view on this scene?
As I'll ever be.
All right, let's do this thing.
Thank you. And do I sound clear?
Yeah, you sound great.
Perfect. Grasping her jaw, he angled her head back as he pressed closer, lowering his head and silencing anything else she may have said. At the same time, his fingers found their way between her legs, sliding slowly in her slickness before diving in. His kiss swallowed her cry, but her body convulsed against his hand, the leg around his hip pressing inward, pulling him closer. His thumb massaged her. His fingers sank into her. His mouth devoured hers. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she was clinging to him for dear life. Shuddering beneath his touch and crying out against his lips, she started to unravel, her head beginning to toss as she all but tried to climb him with the one leg still hooked around him. He forced her head still as he watched her. Her leg beneath her threatened to buckle. Her fingers clawed at his flesh. She bucked against him, biting at his lips in her heightened state. And when she exploded, arching off the wall into him, she watched him devour her response, memorizing every eyelash flutter, tremble of muscle in her belly, panted breath, and the whisper of his name.
There we go. Good job, Zach.
Ooh,
Well, thank you.
the whisper of his name.
I like that
Zach,
line.
this was great. I mean, you got all the previous notes from Jessie, so that was probably
clearly.
helpful.
Yeah.
Go second.
Yeah.
I mean, I think your grasp of the material is really great. I wrote down that, and this is something that I feel like I've worked through, and so that's maybe why it's catching my ear. But I feel like I caught myself for a while speaking really in a legato, you know what I mean, like way where grasping her jaw, he angled her head back as he sort of like stretching out the words. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, I heard myself and I went, "Wait, that's not how I talk. That's clearly not how I talk." And so I've really been focusing lately on making sure that my cadence matches what my actual speech is. And that's another thing that, we talked about with Jessie is like, I think sometimes people come in and they think I have to have this certain voice on the mic and it has to sound a little bit different than my voice. And my pitch, as we continue to fight for human narrators, is to use your voice and to really lean into, your natural cadence, your natural speaking patterns, how you would say words, how long the words would be, to not have to feel like you have to put on any sort of a voice when you're behind the mic, especially with something this intimate. Because I think, again, with these really intimate scenes, people are sort of sensitive to anything that might take them out of the story or take them out of the suspension of disbelief. And if they feel like, is this really how this guy talks? Or is he trying to tell me a story? You know, anytime we're like any acting, if we're performing, we're probably not feeling it. And if we're not feeling it, the audience is not feeling it. And there's nothing more true than that in voiceover. In acting, there's a lot of visual cues. There's lights, there's this, there's that, there's props. But in voiceover, it's just this. And if I'm smiling, you can hear it. And if I'm upset, you can hear it, right? Like it's such a sensitive transfer of our emotions. So, you know, I would encourage you to see if you can experiment with really letting go and being kind of loose and casual and almost just reading it out loud. And if I were you, I would record yourself reading it out loud, and then I would compare it to a recording of you reading it before.
Sure.
And see how that sounds different. You know what I mean? Like my kind of like guidance to get to that internal barometer is to find a moment when you're feeling totally authentic. You're not thinking about it. You know, you're not thinking about how I'm going to say it. You feel like you're in the moment, and then go back and listen to that. And that's going to be your bar. And that's going to be what you want to hear every time. Don't listen to how it sounds. Like, oh, this sounds good or that sounds bad. Wait for the moment where you feel it. Listen to that. And that's going to be your good sound, even though it might not sound right to you.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I think so. I was, frantically typing while you were talking, but yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway is, like you said, let go, be a little more casual, just a little bit more natural, rather than rather than performative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the way you're speaking now, go ahead, Troy.
That was my struggle for the longest time. Was, I felt like there was a certain way that I needed to sound, like, I should sound sexy, or I should sound like I have a deep voice, or I should, it's like, whenever I focused on how I should sound, it always sounded, it didn't sound authentic. And then I started just kind of, I finally got to the point where I just started enjoying the story, and it changed. It's a big change. But I think that's one of those things where we feel like we need to sound a certain way, and that's when our inner director is our enemy.
Sure.
So
yeah, and it's a
Thank
process. You. Yeah, of course. Look, you got a great sound. You got, you're top 11. I mean, you're great. So just a little more letting go and connecting with that authentic voice, and I think you're going to be great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And mic time, I think, is a big part of it. Like, just more time doing it is, you'll finally get to the point where you become more comfortable with just saying the words.
And also, I was going to say, Zach, maybe try recording without headphones, because sometimes listening to yourself when you're in that state is hard. So,
sure.
Give it a go. Take them off. See if you can really connect. Go back and listen to that, and that's going to be your bar.
Great.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good point. Okay, Lainey, have you pulled up your manuscript?
It's all here. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, you sound great.
Okay.
You sound great.
I'm just on my phone mic right now, so.
Are you? Okay. Now you really have to perform.
Oh
now
boy.
the pressure's really on. No, you're gonna be great. I'll mute my mic and I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you. Grasping her jaw, he angled her head back as he pressed her closer, lowering his head and silencing anything else she may have said. At the same time, his fingers found their way between her legs, sliding slowly in her slickness before diving in. His kiss swallowed her cry, but her body convulsed against his hand. The leg around his hip pressed inward, pulling him closer. His thumb massaged her, his fingers sank into her, his mouth devoured hers. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she was clinging to him for dear life. shuddering beneath his touch and crying out against his lips. She started to unravel, her head beginning to toss as she all but tried to climb him, with one leg still hooked around him. He forced her head still as he watched her. Her leg beneath her threatened to buckle. Her fingers clawed at his flesh. She bucked against him, biting at his lips in her heightened state. And when she exploded, arching off the wall into him, she watched him devour her response, memorizing every eyelash flutter, tremble of muscle in her belly, panted breath, and the whisper of his name.
Awesome,
That
lady.
was nice. Yeah, that was really nice.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
It's cool to hear those two different takes on that same script. You know,
For sure.
It is. I know.
like
It's so interesting to hear how everybody does it so differently, which just reminds us that humans are very important to the world. We need to keep saving the humans.
Yeah, really.
Save them. So, Lainey, this was great. You know, we had talked earlier. You weren't here yet about the different beats in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think sometimes a trap in these kinds of intimate scenes is that it can feel like it's all the same note. It's all the same moment. It's all the same feeling. But this scene does have a lot of variety in it. If we're looking at those buzzwords of, we talked about, like, she started to unravel, she exploded, like things that are happening. I think what I wrote down for you in your read is that, first of all, I think you also could, like with Zack, like maybe take a listen to yourself off the headphones in your authentic voice and see, does this sound like, how I normally speak? Is this my cadence, or am I feeling like I'm putting on a little bit of a narrator voice?
Okay.
Because I think you probably have more room to be more connected to your authentic voice.
Sure.
And then the other thing I wrote down is that, one of the other traps in these kinds of scenes is that it can feel really urgent, as we're ramping up in this really intimate, serious act. Things can feel like they're moving really fast, and sometimes it can feel like the urgency is necessary because of what it says, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, like that's how we're supposed to tell the story. But I think if we're connecting to our authentic experience of intimacy, that's not really how the story feels in the moment. It doesn't always feel like it's a high-speed chase to the end. There can be moments of time freezing and reflecting on what's happening, or these, like, memorizing every eyelash flutter. You can't memorize an eyelash flutter if you're speeding through to the end, right? Like that's something that is like a time is frozen type of thing. Tremble of muscle in her belly, these kinds of things. So I think, and with giving you that opportunity to slow some of these parts down, I think will give you more power in telling the story, because when everything is urgent, it can get easy to lose like the thread, or lose connection to the piece.
If you don't mind, Stephanie, I'm going to repeat one of the things that you told to Jessie that I thought was so damn cool. For Lainey's benefit, one of the things that she recommended was not telling the story, but confessing the story as if it was happening to you, as if you were telling a close friend or a confidant what's happening, as if it were in first person, as if it were you experiencing that story. And I think that's really, it's like such a paradigm shift that it could make a big difference in the way that you communicate this this story, as if you're confessing this scene that you're seeing play out in front of you.
That's a really good point. Thank you.
So
yeah, and I think with third person omniscient, it can be a little bit hard because you don't necessarily have a specific point of view, but you could pick one. No story doesn't have a point of view. The storyteller has a point of view. And so as the storyteller, if you're telling the story about two people that you observed, what would your point of view be? And I think the other thing I wrote down about the urgency is that it made it sound at times like you were maybe worried about her, because some of this, like, I think it was the legs, you know, like clinging to him for dear life. Like I started to feel worried. what's happening? Is she okay? You know,
Are you okay?
are you okay? Do you need help?
Wait a minute, this is taking a bad turn.
So, right. So to know, like, as the storyteller, I'm not worried about her. This is exciting. We're all happy. We're having fun. And maybe slowing down and kind of sinking into those moments would help to convey that message more.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
One of the things that I was struggling with this passage is that the sentences are very long, and like breathing was like an issue, and I think that's part of the reason I went so fast.
Yes.
And so I'm a singer. I've been singing for 20 years. Like,
okay,
I have good breath control. But I'm wondering, like, what do you do when an author gives you an excerpt like this that has very long phrases?
This is an excellent question. I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm so excited to talk about it. I'm a singer too, and I'm going to teach you something that's going to hopefully be something you can relate to, which is orchestral breathing. So when you're in, a choir or an orchestra, or whatever, you all take breaths at separate times. So you're going to pretend that you're a bunch of people, and you're going to take your breaths at separate times. And so what that means is, let's pick a long sentence: shuddering beneath his touch, breath, and crying out against his lips, breath. She started to unravel, breath, her head beginning to toss, breath, as she all but tried to climb him, breath, with the one leg still hooked around him. That's how I would read that sentence. And these are not giant breaths, but, shuddering beneath his touch and crying out against his lips. And it gives you a natural place to pause, because these are all different thoughts, right? Shuddering beneath his touch is a different thought than crying out against his lips. You don't have to say those things in the same breath. Just like you wouldn't have to say the same line of music in the same breath if, there's different thoughts within each verse or whatever. Whenever you have a comma,
experiment
breathe.
too, right? I mean, you can experiment with where you're going to take your breath. If it means different, or different meaning is conveyed to the phrases depending on where you take your breath, because there's a natural pause there, right? So.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you think about how people talk, right? Like how you talk, or how sometimes I like to listen to podcasts, because people in podcasts are just talking. They're not worried about when they're breathing, but we don't hear them breathing. So what's going on there? Well, what's happening is that they're taking tiny little, I just did it, micro breaths in between their sentences when they're paused, right? Like there's a natural way that we speak as humans that I think we forget when we get behind the microphone and we get these long run-on sentences.
Right.
So I would invite you to go back and take a look, maybe mark it out if you need to in the beginning, just to give yourself some practice. But pretty soon, I think you're going to find that it's more instinctual than you think to just pause every time you have a different thought. Take that tiny little breath, tiny, so that by the end, you're not out of breath. It doesn't mean that you're like every time you have a comma, you suck in a huge breath. If you're taking 5 breaths in a run-on sentence, you won't be out of breath by the end. You can keep going.
Yeah.
Tiny.
And one of the things that you're at a disadvantage here, because this is the only thing that you may have read by Lily K.C., but every book you read, every author has their own, their own pattern of writing. And some people will give you a 1-paragraph sentence where you have to make your own your own places, right?
Not I.
But
and
as you go along, you begin to get the feel for, as you become more comfortable with the way that they write, you begin to fall into their cadence.
Right.
And it becomes more natural. It's not as difficult by the time you get to the middle of the book as it is in the beginning.
Yeah. And also just remember as actors, and this is something that I've been embracing more over the last few years, is that this is our interpretation of this material. Of course, we are hired to convey the author's intent, and that is our job. However, it's sort of like, commissioning a photograph to be turned into a painting. There's going to be some differences along the way. And one of the things that I haven't been sticking to as much is punctuation. Because if I'm feeling a different way than the punctuation, and that feeling is backed up by the last 2 paragraphs that I've been narrating, and I'm in an emotional state, I'm not going to pause for a comma that doesn't feel right. And if they want to send it to me as a pickup, they can, but they never do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you're in your authentic place and you're speaking as you would speak. And so to let go of some of that need to really adhere to all the punctuation and the sentence structure, because, you know, we are humans bringing a human experience to the printed word, which is a different art form than the book itself.
For sure. Thank you. That's all really helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
I sure would like to participate in this conversation, but this jerk outside my door won't stop barking.
Oh,
So my studio is not quite soundproof, but no, I think that's really good. That's a really good question, and I think that this is a really good script to point that out, because yeah, you will have to, you know, take your own breaths and find ways to make it sound like you did it on purpose. You know, so
yeah.
So do you guys have any questions from the coaching that you got tonight? This is your opportunity.
Nothing comes to mind, especially from the coaching. If Lainey hadn't brought it up, I was going to ask about breaths in some of these long phrases here. So I'm really glad that got covered. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah,
It's such a good question. It comes up
yeah.
a lot. And I think people are maybe afraid to ask about it because they feel like they should just know how to do it. But it's hard to learn how to do that when you're given a run-on sentence or a giant paragraph. So I get it.
Yeah. Well, I think
if it's okay.
Yeah.
So I've been trying all week really hard to turn off author brain and turn on narrator brain. But I did notice some things about her writing style, and she really likes kind of these parallel phrases. And I guess, like you had mentioned, not making it sound like repetitive or the same. And if you had any sort of recommendations in regards to like those lists and parallel structures that we're getting.
Can you give me an example? Just because I don't have an author brain.
Yes. And when she exploded, arching off the wall into him, she watched him devour her response, memorizing every eyelash flutter, tremble of muscle in her belly, panted breath, and it's a one big long list. The last sentence.
So to me, it feels like a bunch of different things. The way that I would approach this, and I think some of this stuff gets more intuitive as you keep doing it and as you keep getting into your narrator brain, is to picture it. You know, see what you say. That's one of my very biggest things I try to do, is memorizing every eyelash flutter. What would that look like? What is the picture of that in my brain? Tremble of muscle in her belly. What does that look like? That's going to sound different if I'm thinking of it and it looks different than an eyelash flutter. Panted breath and the whisper of his name. Those are all really different things, even though they sound like they're in a big list. You know, and then we had one earlier that I had pointed out, which was, where was it?
His thumb massaged her.
Oh, I think, his thumb massaged her, his fingers sank into her, his mouth devoured her. So this one I had talked about being more of a progression. So the thumb is the starting place, the fingers are the middle place, and then the mouth is really like sort of the heightened end of that. Which, you know, if we're talking about, we're confessing this to someone, we would say, you know, the thumb massaged her, his fingers sank into her, and his mouth devoured hers, right? Like, these are, when you solve the problem of, who am I confessing this to? How do I feel about it? And what does it look like? Most things are not going to be an issue anymore. They will all solve themselves. If you're really in that headspace, who am I talking to? How do I feel about it? And what does it look like? It'll just come out. You won't have to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a bit more of like an alto voice, and it is a little bit raspy. And I think sometimes there's no dialogue in this section, but sometimes when I am voicing a female character, I do sort of soften it. And I'm just wondering if, I don't know, if you have any other suggestions, or if I just sort of lean into what I have. I don't know.
Well, my personal opinion is to lean into what you have. I would really never alter your natural, authentic voice for your female main character unless it's necessary, unless there's some reason that you have to. I've done series before where now I'm the sister, and the sister sounded different in the first book, and so that's a little bit different. But otherwise, you want to have access to your full instrument, like we talked about earlier. And if you're changing the female main character, that's going to limit you.
Yeah, it's still you. It's just a different attitude.
Right.
Yeah.
And then your range is just going to be slightly lower, on the spectrum than another female's range, but it's still going to be a range. You're still going to have your male voice and your female voice and your higher and lower. So embrace the range that you have, I would say. Always err on the side of, is this how I naturally speak? If it is, great. If it's not, let me think about that. Why am I speaking in a way that I don't naturally speak?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I think this is a really good session.
I could do this all day.
Wouldn't it be great? This would be really cool. Yeah. If we could hire somebody to just do the bookkeeping and do all the other stuff, maybe carve out a few hours to read.
Sure.
Just hang out and talk about, and then hang out and talk about reading.
That's right.
Be a pretty cool gig. So
right until they lock us up, that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good job for like people who love to talk and read are. It's just this is the dream job. So I think you guys really did give some great. Just some great reads right off the top. This is good preparation for the submissions. We're going to have a few days to for you to get your submissions in. Then we're going to have a few days of voting, and then Stephanie, you and your fellow mentors are going to get together in a recap, and we're going to talk about your impression of how their submissions go. That's going to be on the 11th, I believe.
Oh, good. So I get to hear the new takes.
Yep. The finished product. So it's going to be a good time, and I'm really encouraged. I think you guys sounded great.
Me too. Great work.
All right.
Amazing.
We'll go to work. Go get your submissions in. I can't wait to hear them, and we will see you on the other side.
Thank you so much, all.
Thank you.
All right.
Very helpful.
Thank you very much.
All.
Take care, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.